Hey everyone, how's it going? I am drunk with power. The reason why I am drunk with power is because I have successfully acquired the launch codes for. Wait,
Don't say that word out loud.
wrong meeting.
Wrong meeting.
Marguerite, because she is a genius, has successfully configured the stream deck that Mer gave us for my birthday. Hi Mer, if you're in the chat. This means I can do things like, oh, who did the fan art this week? Button. I did that. I didn't type anything. I didn't click a mouse. It's just there. See, how about this? You want a goose? You got a goose. You want the chungus? The chungus is live. Ham? I got you covered. This is going to cause so much trouble.
It's like a butt, but with
In
a
the
button.
best way. Exactly. Anyway, just before, we retreat to our secret volcano HQ. Welcome, one and all. I am Alistair. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. 10 feet to my left is the amazing Marguerite.
Hello.
Who will be in the chat. Here is what we do for those of you who are brand new. You're going to get 3 things tonight. Think of it as a fun sandwich where every piece of the sandwich is fun. The first part is going to be the opening monologue. Think of this as the trailers. This is a chance for you to get situated while I talk to you about a thing. Then we'll do, and I can tell you exactly what we're doing tonight, chapters 23 through 25 of A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by Ursula Vernon, writing as T. Kingfisher. Then this will happen, but we're not there yet. Also, there are a couple of things we must attend to before we get to anything else. Firstly, a massive thanks to Z for the 2 just incredible pieces of opening fan art. That one of Marguerite and I is so cute. Oh
again.
my god.
Hit the button again.
I mean this button.
That button, yes.
See? Just amazing. Thank you so much for that. That melted my heart. It truly did. And secondly, a couple of days ago, we received an envelope, Wendy. An envelope you will notice we have saved to tonight to open.
Oh, wait for me.
Okay.
Oh, you can get started. It's okay. Just being very useful. Oh, see.
So we've got, oh my goodness. So there is a note.
Okay. You should have said the envelope, please.
The envelope, please.
Is that a pumpkin? Okay, I will dress Chungus while you read the note. Hopefully
Another
it's not
little
terrible.
dress-up cozy for Chungus, courtesy of a night on which I had difficulty sleeping. These things are genuinely valuable for me, They occupy me when I'm too awake, feeling low, and I learn new techniques to use in my proper projects. Oh, Wendy.
Aww.
Thank you so much. And there's, spooky Christmas costume ahoy.
Anyway, spooky.
Yes. Brilliant. Thank you so much,
I
Wendy.
think it looks more like a pumpkin with the turnip tucked inside. Okay.
Oh, so it becomes like... right. Check it out.
Chungus has a pumpkin hat. And apparently it's reversible or...
No, like tuck the turnip under.
Oh, so like this?
Yeah. That's a pumpkin.
That's much more pumpkin-y, I think. Obviously, we're going to have to get more Chungus art as this continues. This is just becoming
This is amazing.
ridiculous.
Show the wardrobe.
Okay, now you can show the wardrobe.
So, it became apparent around the time of the second delivery that Chungus needed a costuming department. And, Chungus has a costuming department now.
So now Chungus has a box for all their costumes.
See?
It's on the inside where the naughty word is. But yes, Chungus has a wardrobe box now, and it has all of their costumes in it.
The hat is so cool, Wendy. I love it.
Okay, everybody say goodnight to Chungus. He's going to sit down and enjoy and soak up the good vibes here.
While we're here,
Tonight's stream snack.
tonight's stream snack.
I feel like we're doing ads now. Basically, I just want to talk about...
Do you like socks?
No.
Have you ever made use of your feet? Do you sometimes wish socks weren't made of glass? Why not try new socks? These are the impossibly cute new mini fudges from Mother Fudger, and we love them, and we haven't quite bought enough of them.
I'm sure that'll change
Mm-hmm.
because they're so good.
I just had one. You should probably have one.
I will admit it.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, calligrapher.
Mm.
I would take paper wizard hats.
Mm.
I would take paper witchy hats. I would take any Halloween costumes that people are interested in sending us for Chungus, by all means.
This is a crafts permissive zone.
Yes. I mean, and Chungus enjoys beards and cummerbunds and scarves, and I'm sure it won't be long before there are feet or other sorts of things. By all means, have fun.
Just go forth.
Chungus Craft Corner, yes, very much so.
Chungus Craft Corner.
Yeah, I know. Not everybody. See, he's here now. Can you flash that art uno mas? Yes, go back to... No, I don't have a button for that! Hang on a second. We'll have to do this manually. I didn't think we'd have to go back to the starting art. Here we go. We'll be right...
Seamless.
Okay, I'll put up a pre-light. Or maybe I should... Okay, I'm taking notes. Don't mind me.
It's a process. It's a process. It's fine.
Go for it.
Fantastic. Right. We've established that cookies are delicious. We've established that Chungus is both fine and has an amazing new hat and a wardrobe. Now, this is an opportunity for you to get comfy, get a drink, eat a snack, take any meds you need, because for the next... Oh, that's a terrible, terrible question.
No! No, Chungus does not have a Twitter account.
Yet.
Oh,
Tonight's opening monologue is from Menus That Made History.
There's a button!
Oh, hey, look. Here's all the details.
See?
Look at that.
Isn't it fun?
So, here we go.
You gonna explain that this was one of your birthday presents?
Yes, this is a birthday present that was given to me by my very good friend Darren Turpin, who's an expert horticulturalist, and who from time to time sends me amazing squashes through the post. You know, things that look like stuff should hatch from them, but not kind of terrifying acid-blooded death machines, but more just really delicious aliens that go very well with sage. Anyway, this is a collection of menus throughout history. There's all kinds of stuff. There's like the first Nobel Prize banquet in here. There is the food that the first successful polar expedition successfully celebrated with when they got there. There is some stuff about early fish and chips, the first ladies' luncheon.
There's the Nobel Prize dinners in there as well.
I mentioned that one, yeah. Lunch to celebrate the Albertine statute, the Women's Freedom League victory breakfast, the first Burns night supper. It's all kinds of stuff. It's really, really good fun. And this one is from Samuel Pepys.
Say hello to Lewis while you're at it, because yet again, Lewis's afternoon mischief has completely stopped now that Alistair's on screen. This is like magic. He just stares and makes happy little
Hello,
birds.
Lewis. How are you?
Lewis is a good bird.
This is from Samuel Pepys. Samuel Pepys is an interesting cat. Lived in 1663. He was an avowed diarist and loved cataloguing the food that he ate. And he ate a lot of food. Also, he lived through the Great Fire of London, and his account of it is one of the principal historical sources for that. It's also notable for the fact that Pepys, at this point, when he realised he would have to evacuate his house, took only what he needed with him and buried one of his most precious possessions in the backyard, which was a wheel of Parmesan. Yes, this is not only proof that Samuel Pepys was someone who was a tremendous fan of cheese, and therefore A-OK in my book, but also an interesting indicator of just how expensive Parmesan wheels always have been. There we go. Like Ocean said, that's so valid. It's like, yep, that's legit. So, Samuel Pepys' Stone Feast. Mild content warning, low-level implied grossness. Thanks to his remarkable diaries, we know that Samuel Pepys liked his food. Barely a day goes by in the 10 years of his daily chronicles of the 1660s in which he does not mention what he had to eat and drink. He records his slight concern about downing a pint of orange juice, the potentially lethal dangers of eating cucumbers, and his delight in a decent venison pasty. These were much larger in his day, the thick pastry keeping them safe-ish to eat for several months. He must have really found pleasure in his pasties, as he mentions them 50 times. He famously even buried his Parmesan cheese to ensure it escaped the flames of the Great Fire of London in 1666. There was one day of the year when he was especially keen to put together a decent menu. On 26th March 1658, Pepys had a massive bladder stone removed. It was a dangerous operation as well as a horribly painful one. His surgeon gave him a bottle of brandy to drink beforehand to numb the agony. The stone was apparently the size of a tennis ball. And to give thanks to his success, he gave a special anniversary dinner on or about the same date each year to celebrate. He called them his stone feasts. Listed to the right is his offering for 1663, which also included good wine of several sorts. Like many of the meals he described, it's a little lacking in the vegetable department. This may have contributed to the bladder stone in the first place, though in later years he does have some interest in salads, probably partially because they were becoming fashionable, and he liked to be up with the zeitgeist. Yes, this is one of the earliest reported incidents of greetings, fellow teenagers. Indeed, while he was a devotee of English cooking, the diary indicates his growing interest in French cuisine and customs, such as using forks, rather than just your fingers. Here's what was on the menu for 1662. A brace of stewed carps, 6 roasted chickens, a jowl of salmon, hot for the first course, a tansy and 2 neats, which are cow's tongues, and cheese for the second, and then we were very merry all the afternoon, talking and singing and piping upon the flageolet. Pepys' interest in food was also reflected in his library, which is available to researchers at Magdalene College, Cambridge. It contains several cookbooks and pamphlets from the 1680s, including the anonymous Gentlewoman's Delight in Cookery. However, Pepys barely did any cooking himself, and these were probably more of scientific interest to him in terms of how his meals were prepared, rather than wedged in place next to the cooker while he was rustling up his favourite oysters. Pepys stopped making diary entries when his eyesight worsened in May 1669, and there is no indication of stone feasts beyond this date, but it seems likely that he kept the joyful revels going up until his death in 1703.
6 chickens for one course?
Yes.
For one person?
No.
I hope not.
Possibly each. The actual menu here is fricassee of rabbits and chicken, leg of boiled mutton, 3 carps, side of lamb, roasted pigeons, 4 lobsters, 3 tarts, lamprey pie, and presumably as a light dusting, anchovies.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh my.
Yes, indeed. Oh, hey, look. Here's the seamless transition to the monologues I forgot to do. We're just going to stay here for a minute so I can feel better about that.
It's okay. New buttons.
New buttons. So, having done the monologues on this entire page the whole time, let's go back to the big boy camera. So, what's up with me this week? Oh, not much. Just my birthday, which was great, and thank you so much to everybody for all the well wishes, and the frankly intimidating pile of presents, which was really cool. We had amazing Reuben sandwiches from Monty's Deli,
Yum.
and we imported Crosstown donuts because Crosstown now deliver countrywide. And every time I opened the box, I did go Crosstown, because I'm secretly 12.
Not so secret.
Not so secretly at all. Watched several terrible movies, which was fantastic. Played an awful lot of Assassin's Creed, which was also fantastic. And now we're back at work, which you'll notice is not a sentence that ends in fantastic, in what could be seen as anything other than an ironic sense. That being said, things continue. I have, across the last couple of days, because we came back from Tuesday, my initial thought was that this week I was going to pick up and revise the book, and then the week looked at me and went, no. I currently have a Schrodinger's chapter in someone else's Doctor Who book, which may or may not be happening, and I accidentally appear to have been asked to write an article about the way that CGI was used to simulate water in Stargate SG-1. So that all happened, and it's not quite the week I had planned, but it's very much the week that is going on, and this week is okay. So yeah, It's all good. And next week will be the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Honest.
it will.
For sure.
I'm not dodging the book. The book is dodging me.
Uh-huh. Okay, good.
And that's what's new with Alistair this week.
I feel like we should have a sound effect. Do-do-do, or something.
Or like a ticker tape. Like do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Really? Why ticker tape?
Because that way it sounds like news.
Okay.
And news is exciting.
Very well. This week exists. Yeah, I'm with you, Eldridge. That's very good
It's
description.
definitely a whole week.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
I'm also kind of half contemplating doing NaNoWriMo again, but...
You want to describe what NaNoWriMo is here, folks?
Yes, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month, which is an event designed to do two things. Give people who have trouble gaining foothold on their projects an opportunity to potentially write a zero draft of a novel if you hit a specific word count every single day in that month. And give a randomly selected professional author a chance to tweet, and it's always the exact same phrase, sometimes in block capitals. Every month is NaNoWriMo month when you're a professional author.
It's like the asshole writer Hunger Games. It's so frustrating.
If you ever read Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, it's like, yeah, you have been picked to be the tool this month. Oh, no. I have a TV show coming out. This sucks.
There are several people in the chat who look like they may be doing NaNoWriMo.
Oh, that's good. That's very good. Excellent. There's plotting.
Thinky thoughts.
Anyway.
You should talk about the one. Tell them about the year you did NaNoWriMo for nonfic.
Oh yeah. 1 year back when we lived in Nottingham, I did NaNoWriMo for nonfic. I called it NaNoJourno. And I basically set a thing, and I had to make sure I did as much as possible across the course of a month. And I ended the month having done 177,000 words. And I still owe myself a tattoo for that. But no, I've done it twice. The first time was about a decade ago, and I produced a book which all the beta readers at the time handed back with, "You could have given this to me without your name on it, and I would have known it was written by you." Which is both a tremendous compliment and indicative of some changes perhaps needing to be made. I blew up Harrogate. In fairness, it was asking for it. And I did drop a dead body on York Minster from 20,000 feet up. But aside from those small things, it's very well behaved.
No, it is still very you.
It's still very me. And I also...
That's right, Wendy. Somebody has to.
There are many reasons you are my friend, and tonight there is another. It's Wednesday. There's another body on the Minster. Oh, it's been a week. What about you?
Oh, that was the entire point, Pezzy, it wasn't as splatty as it probably should have been.
Yes, in fact, that was the first of many twists.
Melted Selfridges. Ooh, that sounds good.
Oh, nice! Can't go wrong with a good bit of melted Selfridge. And I also done it a couple of years ago, and that became the Icarus thread, which is the thing which I am trying to get back to the point where I can revise and get out to agents by the end of this year. So I'm a fan. I like Nano. I think it's really good. I think it gives you an excuse to write a terrible draft and then do one of my favourite things, which is play detective and dig into the draft to find the book that's really there. And I'm looking at potentially taking a course as well, which may help with writing that. It's Meg Ellison and someone else whose name I have completely forgotten.
Marianne... Actually, I want to say... Let me look at it.
Okay. It's one of the adjunct courses for Writing the Other, which is such a fantastic project. And it's a course about how to write fat characters. And I wrote the Icarus thread very much in mind that 3 characters are people of size. And one of the things I want to do in the, pardon my nose, revision is make them dealing with life in low Earth orbit one of the things which is central to the book. And not in that kind of, look at the fat guy way. More just explore what the different environment does to different physicalities. Thank you very much. You can actually now see the link in the chat. Good job. Thanks, hon. And...
Thank you, Jen. There are gift subs being given.
Splendid.
Yay!
Thanks, Jax. And I want to kind of focus in on that a little bit. Also, it's possible there are too many nanobots in the book. But that's something.
One thing at a time.
But that's something we'll come to later. Anyway, that's pretty much where I am at the moment, which is finding my feet again after a week off, and doing all right. So, shall we?
Do a brief recap?
Yes. I'm even on the right camera. Get in. Previously, all kinds of stuff went wrong. All of it really fun and entertaining. Mona is a 14-year-old girl living in a city ruled by the Duchess. Mona is also a magic user, and she's an unusual magic user in that all magic users in this world are, in that she has control over one thing. Mona is a bread wizard. She is extraordinarily talented with bread. She can animate it, she can persuade it to grow, persuade it to burn, persuade it to float, persuade it, in the case of her friend Bob the sourdough starter, to live. Mona has a pretty nice life. She is an orphan, but she lives with her aunt and uncle, and they're lovely people, and she really likes her work. She's good at it. She takes professional pride in it, and that's just one of the many, many reasons why finding the dead girl in the bakery at 4 a.m. is a really bad thing. What becomes apparent really quickly is that the dead girl is both the older sister of Spindle, a street kid who very reluctantly befriends Mona, and also another magic user. And what becomes even more apparent very fast is that magic users in this city are in terrible danger. Mona and Spindle go on the run. They investigate what's going on, and they establish very quickly that the chief inquisitor of the city, Oberon, or as we like to call him, Oberon, is behind all of this, as is his terrifying henchman, the Spring Green Man. Across the last couple of installments, Mona and Spindle have climbed up a literal toilet to get to the Duchess and do that thing which all kids know to do, which is when something bad is happening, get an adult. The only problem being that the adult knows exactly what's going on and is powerless. They talk to the Duchess, and along with loyal guard Joshua, they go and see the last active duty wizard in the castle, who almost, maybe, gets a message to the armies of the city, which have been decoyed elsewhere, shortly before the Spring Green Man kills him. A fight and a chase ensues, and now Mona, Spindle, the Duchess, and Joshua are in even more trouble.
Reminder of content warnings?
Content warnings.
There's a button! I gave you a content warning button!
Content warnings. Murder mystery, gluten, accents. Chapter 23. We must move quickly, said the Duchess. The army is at least 10 days away, and Oberon knows it as well as we do. We move against him now, tonight, before he is expecting it. She made this announcement while we all stood in a circle around the Spring Green Man, who had a massive bruise across his forehead and was trussed up like a turkey. Joshua had tied him up with several belts and one of Master Gildane's dressing gowns, torn into strips. It was a haphazard binding, but it didn't look haphazard. Actually, it looked as if he'd strangle himself if he so much as sneezed. Spindle had wanted to kill him outright, right then and there for what he did to Tibby. The Duchess talked him out of it. There will be a trial, she said. We will not compound murder with murder. We will see justice done, so that everyone in the city knows that magic folk cannot be killed with impunity. I'm pretty sure that's the only thing that convinced Spindle in the end. That and the fact that Joshua had a much bigger sword. Tonight, said Joshua, nodding, we do not have time to delay. How are we going to do that? Asked Spindle. And what about Master Gildane? I wiped my nose. I was trying very hard not to cry for the old wizard. We had set him in the other room with his arms over his chest and the sheet off his bed thrown over him for a shroud. I'd known him for less than an hour. I wanted to bawl my eyes out. He'd been kind to me. He hadn't acted like I was just a little two-bit magicka. He'd sent the message that might save us, and if I'd just been looking up instead of into the water... The Duchess put an arm around my shoulders. I know, she said softly. I know. We'll give him a hero's burial, but we can't do it tonight. It won't do him any good, and if we don't act now, we'll waste what he did for us. I took a deep, shuddering breath. She was right. I tried to cram the sad bits into a ball and squash them into the hollow place inside my chest. Later. I could cry about this later. The gingerbread man, who had lost most of his buttons but was otherwise unharmed, reached up a hand and patted my face. The Duchess squeezed my shoulder and let go. Joshua, how many guards are still loyal to me personally? Almost all of them, Your Grace, said Joshua immediately. Ministers and lords I can't speak for, but the guard is yours. Oberon's personal guard would fight for him, but there aren't many else. The Duchess nodded. Lords and ministers we'll deal with later. Go, assemble the guard. Get as many men as you can, and do it quietly. Bring them to the Great Hall. You have 30 minutes. But Your Grace, I can't leave you alone. She sighed. Go and get Harold from my chamber guard, then, and send him here. Joshua fidgeted inside his armour. Your Grace, that would still leave you alone for a few minutes, and with this, he nudged the spring green man with his boot, and no one to protect you. What if he comes too? The Duchess reached under her dressing gown and pulled out a knife. It was as long as the big butcher knife that Aunt Tabitha used to cut up pork for our pork buns, and she sat down next to the spring green man and held the knife a few inches from his throat. Caw, said Spindle with obvious approval. I blinked. This was a side of the Duchess I had not expected. Joshua wrung his hands. He's off. He's a wizard. So is Mona, said the Duchess. Joshua, go. The sooner you go, the sooner this is all over, and the less chance that he'll wake up. Joshua went. If you have never tried to make conversation with a monarch over the hog-tied body of an evil wizard with a dead man in the next room, let me tell you, it is not easy. Talking about the weather didn't seem appropriate, and so, do you think this will work, or are we all going to die? Didn't strike me as terribly good either. Do you think this will work, or are we all going to die? Asked Spindle, who was not troubled by social niceties. I sighed. Normally, I would say something reassuring, said the Duchess dryly, gesturing with her knife, but you aren't ordinary children, are you? So, I don't know. I don't know if it will work. We have already gotten farther than I expected. I am hoping that if a troop of the guard throws Oberon bodily out of the city tonight, we may buy ourselves time enough for the army to return. If Oberon's gone, though, that's it, right? I asked. It's over. We got the Spring Green Man. We don't need the army. The Duchess exhaled. I don't know, Mona. I hope so. But Oberon has allies, and that is why I don't dare kill him outright. She smiled, but it was an unhappy, twisty smile. It looked like it hurt a little. I know that he should be allowed a fair trial and all that, but I will be honest, my dears. I would have him executed without any of the niceties if I dared. I have seen enough to convince me of his wickedness, but the lords and ministers that have allied themselves with him might rise up in revolt. This was depressing. I had thought that if we just got rid of Oberon and the Spring Green Man, everything would go back to normal. It hadn't occurred to me that we might be able to throw Oberon out and still have more problems. There was a knock on the door. I jumped. Spindle got up and opened the door a crack, leaning his whole body against the wood to keep it from being thrown open. Who's there? He growled, trying to make his voice sound deeper. I can go more Batman with that. Who's there?
Really? Spindle's gonna be that deep?
Where are they? Who's there? There we go. He growled, trying to make his voice sound deeper.
Sorry.
Harold, for her grace. The Duchess nodded. Spindle opened the door, and the other guard from her chamber door came in. He looked from Spindle to me, to the Duchess, to the trussed-up Spring Green Man, and back to the Duchess. His expression didn't change in the slightest. "Your Grace," he said. "Still the best poker face in the kingdom," said the Duchess warmly. The new guard, Harold, sat down next to the Spring Green Man and drew his sword, laying practically on top of the mage's neck. It looked rather absurdly like a knighting. The Duchess stood up and began prowling around the room. I found some tea. Still with a little warmth left from Gildane's spell, and that made me cry again. But I did it in the corner, and I don't think anyone noticed. Harold was even less talkative than Joshua. The Duchess chewed on her lower lip and stared through chairs and bookcases, looking at something only she could see. It's kind of sad when you've got an evil wizard tied up at your feet, a dead man in the next room, the monarch of the kingdom pacing the floor, and you're waiting to instigate a coup that will throw out a traitor to the kingdom, and you realize you're bored. Waiting's never interesting, I guess. I was feeling a sick dread at the thought that I might have to see Oberon again, or that he might win, in which case we were probably all going to die, or end up in the dungeons and then die. But I was still restless. If I left my mind alone, it wanted to start replaying Master Gildane's death over and over, and minds are not our friends. I wandered over to the bookcase and ran my fingers over the row of spines, wondering if there was something to read. Most of them were thick, heavy-bound books that looked even more boring than waiting. My fingers left long trails in the dust, and I had to wipe grime off, not on my clean tunic. I used the 2 small pants. I was really starting to loathe those pants. On the 3rd shelf, 8 books in, my fingers stopped. The binding was just as dusty as all the others, but it had an interesting pattern of leaves and spirals on it. Also, it was a lot thinner, so I pulled it down. The title said, "Spiraling Shadows, Reflections on the Use of Magic." An embossed fern wove in and out of the letters. There was no author listed. I looked around. Harold was glaring at the Spring Green Man, who, unbelievably, was starting to snore. Spindle was flopped over in a chair, upside down, picking at a spot on bare fabric on the arm of that chair. The Duchess prowled, gave me a fake smile in passing, kept prowling. So, nobody was stopping me. And it would probably be too dense to read anyway. I was an okay reader. I mean, compared to somebody like Spindle, who couldn't read a broadsheet, but mostly for recipes and stuff like that. I'm not sure why I hesitated. It'll probably sound weird to say that the book felt different in my hands. Not hot, not cold, not even really magic, just kind. It felt like a cup of tea on a cold day, or a warm scone left by the oven. Could a wizard's book feel like that? I never really thought about a wizard's library much. Mine was all cookbooks. None of them were magic. A real wizard's library would presumably be much grander and have books with curses on them that you had to chain to the shelves. They would blast any mortal who dared touch them. I glanced along the shelves. None of them were chained. Most of them just looked old and tired, rather like Master Gildane himself had. Spiraling Shadows was the only one that seemed different. Would a cursed book really feel kind when you held it? Well, if I was going around cursing books, it would probably be a lot easier to get people to pick up one that felt nice, rather than one covered in skulls that you had to chain to the shelf. I couldn't imagine Master Gildane keeping cursed books lying around, though. It just hadn't seemed like the type. And Elgar seemed less interested in curses than in knives. I cracked open the cover. The first few pages were blank. I flipped to a page at random and read, "I say again, giving magical life to inanimate objects is not a function of size, but of intelligence and duration. The life force of an elephant is no greater than that of a mouse, merely it lasts longer and is greater in intellect. If you would give life to the unliving, it matters not whether it is as large as a mountain or as small as a house cat. The spark of life differs not in power. The weakest may command a mountain if they have the gift of it, but the mountain will be mindless and remain living only a moment's time. The text was really old, and had some odd confusion between the F's and the S's, and a couple of the words gave me trouble. Inanimate doesn't come up often in cookie recipes. Still, it was readable. I just wasn't sure it made sense. Was it saying that if you were making something come alive, it didn't matter how big they were? And what did it mean by alive? Was it talking about things like my gingerbread man? And if that was what it meant, did it mean that I could make a gingerbread elephant come alive? I grinned, despite myself. That couldn't be what it meant. I mean, I'd never tried to make a full-size gingerbread elephant, but surely that was impossible. Otherwise, minor talents like me would be setting gingerbread monsters running through the streets. Wouldn't we? Not that I would. Well, maybe just one. Just to see if I could. Probably. Can that be right? The breadcrumb circus took a lot less power than my little gingerbread friend, and they were so much smaller. Although the breadcrumb circus hadn't been intelligent at all, they could only do one thing each. The little bread lion tamer waved his little chair, and that was it, and the little tigers paced around and jumped on the little platforms, but that was all. They only did more elaborate tricks if I was actively directing them. It had gotten better when I used the single loaf of bread apiece, but they still weren't smart. But my gingerbread man, he was pretty smart, and he'd lasted a really long time, whereas the circus had probably fallen apart an hour after I'd left. Did it matter I'd baked his dough myself? Had my hands in it. The unbaked dough had been a lot more responsive to me too, and I'd always known that I might make the gingerbread man dance when I made up a batch. If I'd mixed up a load of dough, knowing what I wanted to do with it. Oh, this was probably ridiculous, but I suddenly found myself wanting access to a really big mixing bowl and an oven the size of a house, just to see if I could make a gingerbread elephant. The door rattled. Harold jumped. Spindle sat up in the chair. The Duchess froze, and even though she was still an ordinary-looking middle-aged woman, she reminded me suddenly of a tiger. A real one, not one made of breadcrumbs. A tiger waiting to pounce. I was proud of her, but strangely it also made me angry. Why couldn't she have been like this before any of this happened? Why had it taken 2 kids and a wizard so old he could barely stand to make her find her courage? Why hadn't anyone done anything? The door opened. It was Joshua. "Your Grace," he said and bowed low. "Your men await." Significant tea.
I stand Joshua so much. By the way, there is an official request from the trap that every time you say Oberon, you have to do the eyebrows thing.
Oberon.
Oberon.
I think I'll get some dialogue with him quite soon, so I'll make sure I do it.
Okay.
Chapter 24. I really didn't want to be around when they arrested Inquisitor Oberon. The Duchess said that she was going to throw him out of the city, and that sounded like a great idea. Except there was a whole lot of city between here and the gates, and what if something went horribly wrong? I couldn't shake the feeling that even now, somehow, Oberon could win, and that meant that I had to go with the Duchess, because however bad it would be if something did go wrong, it would be a lot worse to not know about it until the guards broke in and Spindle and I got dragged down to the dungeon. Not by Joshua and Harold, of course. Other guards, the constables maybe. Joshua seemed more like the Duchess's bodyguard than a constable. It was never going to be easy with constables again, no matter how many scones they bought. Speaking of dungeons, the Spring Green Man was already on his way there. Harold was carrying him like a sack of meal, and he was still snoring occasionally. I don't think it's very safe to sleep when someone has hit you over the head really hard, but I have to confess, I was having a hard time dredging up any sympathy for the assassin. Besides, they said that they had cells to keep mages in, but I wasn't sure how that would work, and if Elgar woke up woozy and concussed, it was probably safer for everybody if he was in some place where he maybe couldn't do anything terrible. Come to think of it, even if he woke up in a great mood and full control of his faculties, it was probably safer for everybody that way. Spindle, who never had mixed feelings about anything, was delighted to come along with the guards and see Oberon get it, as he put it. The Spring Green Man might have killed Tibby, but Oberon had been the one to set him loose, and Spindle was thrilled right down to his toes. Maybe he'll resist. Maybe he'll resist it. The guards will have to whack him, he hissed to me as we followed Joshua down the hallway. Maybe he'll say something political and grown up, and the guards will turn around and whack us, he whispered gloomily back. Well, ain't you a bright ray of sunshine? I sighed. Spindle's natural distrust of authority seemed to break down a bit when authority was fighting with itself. Or maybe the Duchess had won him over when she pulled out that knife. I stared down at my not standard issue for pages shoes. My pants still didn't fit, but I'd wedged the book Spiraling Shadows into my belt, and something about the cover pressing against my belly made me feel a little better. I was still half sick with terror. What if Oberon sees me? What if he recognizes me? But it was a walking around and doing stuff terror, not a curl up in the corner and whimper terror, so I guess that's something. Legit. How many men did you bring? Asked the Duchess as we turned towards the main hall. 37, said Joshua, nearly all the palace guard. There were 4 or 5 who were not quite right in their reaction. Almost, but not quite. We'll lock them in the pantry. They may be innocent. I think it likely that some are, but I would not be surprised if 1 or 2 of them are in Oberon's pay. It seemed better that they not have a chance to carry tales. 37 should be enough, said the Duchess. The nobles have their own guards, but they cannot keep all of them in the palace. Oberon has no more than 6 men of his own, and he must see that they cannot stand against so many. She chewed on her lower lip. I hope that he must see. Joshua pushed open the door to the great hall. 37 men doesn't sound like a lot, but they can really fill a room. Most of them were wearing armour and carrying swords, and a couple had those big halberd things that looked like an axe and a spear got together and had really scary babies. Spindle and I both stopped in the doorway. That is a lot of guys with swords, and no matter how much I liked the Duchess up until a couple of hours ago, people like that had been trying to capture me and throw me in a dungeon. I guess Spindle felt the same way. He shoved his hands in his pockets and said, "Caw!" The Duchess sailed into the room, and every man put his fist over his heart in salute to the monarch. It was amazing to watch her. Suddenly, the tired, timid woman we'd met was, not gone, not at all, but covered in a kind of shell. She smiled at them, and I bet every single one of them thought that she looked him specifically in the eyes when she did. I guess that's something you learn when you're royalty, or maybe that's why some people get to be royal, and the rest of us make bread or carry halberds for them. My friends, she said, in a low, carrying voice. They all leaned forward, just a little, when she spoke. I realize how strange it is that you have all been called together in private here. But we go tonight to roust a traitor from our kingdom, a man who wishes to, she paused, to overthrow me and set himself up as the ruler of our city. A low growl rose from the guards, like a great dog on a chain. It was obvious to everyone that overthrow wasn't the word that she had planned to use. Somebody wanted their Duchess dead, and the guards were not happy. I cannot tell you, my friends, how grateful I am for your loyalty. In these times it is the only coin in our kingdom of any worth, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. She put her hand over her own heart and saluted them, and I swear every guard in the room stood an inch taller. Ain't that something? Said Spindle softly. Joshua stepped in then and took command of the operation. Halberdiers to the fort. Every man look to the other members of your watch. We go to confront a traitor. Treachery spreads like wildfire. Let no one slip away unnoticed. I trust you all, or I would not have called you here. But the life of the Duchess, the welfare of the kingdom, is too important to place on my judgment alone. I saw nods here and there, and set expressions. Spindle and I weren't going to be able to leave even if we wanted to. Move out, said Joshua, and at the head of a column, with the Duchess striding on his left hand, they turned and made for our doorway. We fell in with the column, next to the Duchess. Didn't seem to be any other option. Spindle gave me a look I couldn't read, and I shrugged helplessly. We were in this way too far to pull out now. The Duchess reached out and took our hands. What happens now? I asked. I nearly had to shout over the tramp of booted feet. Now, we throw the dice, she said. It didn't seem like a very stealthy approach. Half the castle had to have known we were coming. I saw a couple of maids peeking around a corner at us, their mouths hanging open, but we arrived at a door that looked like any other door, and 4 halberdiers lowered their weapons and stood in a semicircle with the blades pointed at the doorway. The Duchess stood behind them, with Spindle and I on either side of her, and Joshua stepped forwards and hammered on the door. The door opened a crack, and Joshua threw his shoulder against it and said, "Duchess's business! Open up!" "You what?" said the guard on the other side. "Duchess's business!" Joshua said, shoving harder. The Duchess's hand tightened on mine. We both had sweaty palms. There were muffled voices inside, and then I heard him. Inquisitor Oberon. "Well, open up then, fool, if it's Duchess's business." But, sir, the door was flung open, and Inquisitor Oberon stood in it, flanked by a pair of guards.
Woo! Sorry.
He seemed smaller. I suppose having a whole bunch of sharp objects pointed at you makes anybody shrink a little. His robes weren't quite perfect, or maybe people look less scary when you're standing with a small army around you, but the eyes... The eyes were the same. I realised that I was squeezing the Duchess's hand in a death grip. She was squeezing back. "Your Grace," said Inquisitor Oberon, and even now I'll give him credit. It's not easy to ignore 37 guards, particularly when there are halberds pointed at you. He managed somehow. The guards might as well have been invisible. "To what do I owe the honour of this visit?" "On suspicion of treason to the crown," said the Duchess, her voice clear and ringing. "You're being exiled from the city." Oberon's eyes widened. Just a little. "May I ask to know the source of these charges?" Nobody but me knew how bad the Duchess's hands were shaking when she said, "You have condemned yourself by your own hand, Oberon. The curfews and registration laws against the mage folk were done without my orders or my knowledge. This is a blow against the very heart of our people, and a presumption of authority that you do not possess." Oberon's eyes didn't flicker. His gaze travelled over the Duchess, dismissed Spindle, dismissed the guards, and landed on me. "Your Grace," he said, "for any presumption I have made, I beg your pardon. But I fear you are being misled. The mage beside you is the true traitor. We have been trying to apprehend her for assault upon her fellow magic folk for some weeks now." My stomach felt like it was being kneaded by a baker with a savage grudge against the dough. The gingerbread man clinging to the back of my collar moved and patted my neck, as if I was a nervous horse. "Mona is a loyal subject of the crown," said the Duchess. "The false arrest orders you have issued will be dealt with summarily. You, in the meantime, will be leaving the city at once." Oberon chose to ignore this last statement. "Your Grace," he said smoothly, "while your judgment is far superior to mine, I would be remiss as your subject if I allowed this to pass. That is a mage and a traitor. She may be clouding your mind even now. If you will not take my word, the mage Elgar is rotting in a cell," said Spindle, who had been about to burst this whole time and clearly couldn't take it anymore. "He stabbed that other fella in front of us and he killed my sister, so shut your trap." Swords and halberds hadn't impressed Oberon, but that rocked him back on his heels. He opened his mouth and then closed it again, and was so plainly at a loss that the Duchess released my hand and stepped forward between the halberdiers. "Exile," she said. "Now. At once. You will not taint this city a moment longer with your presence." The Inquisitor pulled himself back. "If your grace will allow me a few moments to pack—" "No," said the Duchess. "I do not trust you not to try to wriggle away. You are coming with us now. Joshua, see to it." Joshua drew his sword. The scrape of steel was very, very loud in the corridor. Oberon's guards drew together in front of him. Joshua looked past them to Oberon. "Do not waste your men's lives," he said. "There are a great many of us, and in the confusion I cannot swear that you yourself would go unharmed." Oberon inhaled very sharply through his nose. I held my breath. Even now I was nearly sure that there would be something he could say that would turn the tide. "Very well," he said. He stepped forwards. Our guards relieved his guards of their swords, and the two men joined him in a little wedge of prisoners. Joshua went first, with 3 men behind him. Then came the prisoners, then the halberdiers, then the Duchess and Spindle and I, then a whole mass of other guards, and the entire parade went down the corridor and into the great hall and out into the courtyard. There was a prison wagon waiting. I've only ever seen one from a distance. They're great, rough things with iron bars and strapped iron wheels, and they do not look better up close. But Oberon stepped up into it with the same haughty expression he had worn stepping into his official gilded carriage. His guards got in as well, although the second one paused and looked at the Duchess. "Your Grace, I have a wife." His tone was pleading. The Duchess nodded. "I cannot allow you to stay," she said, "but Joshua will see to it that she is given a pension or coin enough to find you." The guard nodded. My heart ached for him. What if his wife couldn't find him again? What if she didn't want to leave the city? What if he wasn't a traitor? What if we were punishing him for no reason? It's hard to rule a city. I wouldn't want to do it. Joshua stepped up onto the wagon's seat. 2 more men joined him, one standing on the wagon's back to watch the prisoners. Another 2 wagons, open farm wagons by the look of them. Joshua must have commandeered someone making deliveries to the kitchen, pulled up alongside, and even more men, including all the halberdiers, climbed into them. The Duchess went up to the back of the prison wagon and gazed inside at Oberon. I felt an intense urge to grab her and pull her back away from the bars, the way Aunt Tabitha used to when I got too close to the animals in the menagerie. What if he was hiding a knife in his socks, or he had one of those rings with poison needles in them that assassins carry? What if he'd thought of something to convince her that I really was a traitor? But no. He only looked at her and said very calmly, "You could have ruled a dozen cities if you had the stomach for it." "I have no desire to be responsible for so many lives," said the Duchess coolly. He nodded once. "You always did lack vision. It does not matter. You will regret this night's work." He didn't add, "Your Grace." The Duchess nodded to Joshua, and the prisoners and the guards rattled out of the courtyard towards the edge of the city. "Spindle," I said as the sound of the wagon wheels faded. "What?" "Did you have to start yelling at Oberon in the middle of the arrest? It worked, didn't it?" I sighed from the bottom of my toes. Yes, it had worked, and the Duchess hadn't pitched Spindle out of the city alongside Oberon for speaking up out of turn, but still. "Your Grace, it's all right, Mona," the Duchess said, and managed a weary laugh. "It all worked out for the best anyway." "What happens now?" I asked. "Well, Joshua deposits him on the other side of the Exiles' Gate. I'll call an emergency meeting of the council to inform them of the events before gossip gets to them, so we spread the word that Oberon has been convicted of treason in absentia, and then I buy off the nobles who would otherwise protest his loss by handing out his lands and his titles as bribes." I gulped. That sounded like a lot of work, and I was already bone-tired. In one night, I'd climbed a garderobe, met a monarch, talked to a mage, seen him killed, nearly gotten stabbed myself, and helped evict a traitor. I could use a nap. For about 6 months or so. "Do we have to be here for all of that?" The Duchess laughed. "No, your job is done, my dears, and you have done it better and more faithfully than anyone could ask. I will probably have to give you medals, and perhaps a knighthood." I gulped again. A knighthood? That also sounded like a lot of work. I mean, I'd have to get armour or something. I just wanted to go to the bakery and make scones or muffins or cinnamon rolls, or all three. "Cool," said Spindle. "Sir Spindle, can you see it? I get horse the size of an elephant and wear armour, and time enough for that in the next few days." The Duchess, amused, turned Luke to one of the guards hovering around the courtyard. "These two are heroes of the realm. Find them some place to sleep, see that they have a late dinner or a very early breakfast, or whatever it is we're up to now." Luke bowed to her and then to us and led us to bedrooms. The bed in mine was gigantic and the sheets were really cold, but a girl came in and built up a fire in the grate. I guess things must have warmed up, but I was already asleep, with a copy of Spiraling Shadows on the bedside table.
By the way, did you see Specky's amazing thing?
I did not.
No, fuck you! Banishment begins!
Yes! I'm going to go to BRB for a moment because I need to step out. I should be right back. And we're back. So, if I was crueler than I am, we would have got to the end of that chapter and it would have gone, the end.
Everybody in the chat's like, "Oh no, no, it's not gonna end there."
It's all fine. Oberon's like, "It's a fair cop, Governor. You got me."
Yeah, no.
Chapter 25. I went home to the bakery the next day. There was an honour guard with me, and when we all walked in, Aunt Tabitha stared at us all blankly for 10 seconds, and then said, "Mona?" and burst into tears. I threw herself into my arms. "Come here, I will hug you." I threw myself into her arms. She smelled like flour, and she put her arms around me, and the horrible weeks I'd spent on the run got a little further away. And I cried a bit, and my uncle cried, and Spindle, who was lounging in the corner getting fingerprints on the glass of the bakery case, snorted and rolled his eyes. "We thought you were dead," said Aunt Tabitha once she'd got herself under control. She started pressing cinnamon rolls into the hands of the guards. "There was all that mess in the basement, but then they put up the posters and I knew you weren't dead because they wouldn't be trying to arrest you otherwise. I knew it." She put her fists on her hips, and I knew that it had to be a mistake because I've had the raising of you for years, girl, and I knew you were no criminal, no matter what some ridiculous constable said. She glared at the guards as if she was planning to take the cinnamon rolls back. They tried to look meek, and not as if they were covered in bits of icing. "It's okay, Aunt Tabitha," I said. "It was all a misunderstanding. Oh, I'll tell you everything, but Bob, is Bob?" I steeled myself. "Bob?" asked Tabitha blankly. "Oh, he was a right mess, half of him gone, but a little flour and water and he perked right up again." She leaned in and murmured, "I gave him a bucket of dead sardines from the fishmonger. Don't tell your uncle." When I went down to the cellar, Bob was so excited to see me that he crawled half out of his bucket, reared up and wrapped himself around my leg. He'd never done that before. I rubbed his back as best I could, given how sticky he was, and he glorped and burbled happily. The gingerbread man rolled his eyes. I think he was a little jealous. So, that was pretty much that. Well, that should have pretty much been that anyway. For 3 days, everything was normal. I wandered around the bakery singing and taking delight in even the most mundane baking activities. Dough rising! How marvellous! And the way the steam burst out of the blueberry muffins when you tore into one right out of the oven. Was there ever anything prettier? Aunt Tabitha hugged me rather more than normal. The regular customers had to hear the story 10 times over. And then at night I'd lie in bed and not sleep. It wasn't that I wasn't tired, I was. And it should have been easier to sleep now than it had been in the church, surely. All the posters had been taken down, word had gone out that we did not register magic as in River Braid, and the people responsible were in a lot of trouble. Oberon was gone, Elgar was presumably under the palace in a cell, eating only bread and water, not even good bread. It should have been easier. It wasn't. I wasn't afraid. Not exactly. I just stared at the ceiling and sleep didn't happen. My mind replayed all the moments that it could have gone wrong, and I cried for Master Gildane, and then I stared at the ceiling some more. I remembered the widow Holloway saying she couldn't sleep after her husband died, walking back and forth in the small hours of the night. I wasn't quite that brave. So mostly I stared at the ceiling. When I gave up trying to sleep, I lit a candle and read a few more passages of Spiraling Shadows. The Duchess had said I could take it, since Master Gildane hadn't had any kin or heirs. She hadn't cried, but her eyes had been a little too bright. Mine too. The book was interesting. Parts of it were much too complex for me, and there was a lot about the philosophy of magic that didn't make any sense at all. Something about magic rising up out of the earth like water from a spring, and ley lines, and its tendency to concentrate in certain vegetables like eggplants. The author devoted a whole chapter to eggplants. Seriously. I skipped that one. But there were also sections about the magic of sympathy, which was what Master Gildane had been talking about, how two things that are joined together once are joined together always on some level, and how a wizard can use that to her advantage. It made me want to perform experiments. Thinking about those experiments got me through the worst of the nights, and then I'd get up early and I'd go and I'd bake them. The first few were pretty straightforward. I'd already figured out that if I made a little breadcrumb creature, it wouldn't hold together well, unless the material was all from the same loaf. I spent hours with the day-old pastries, trying to work out the limits. It turned out that things all baked at the same time, on the same sheet, generally got along okay too. From there, it was a short step to holding one cinnamon roll and trying to make the rest of the pan do something. "Mercy," said Aunt Tabitha the first time she walked in and saw me standing over a pan of cinnamon rolls that had caught fire. She grabbed the flour and dumped it out over the pan, smothering the flames. "What are you doing?" I looked gloomily at the cinnamon roll in my hand, failing, mostly. I tried to warm the one on the pan up, that was all, pushing the magic through the cinnamon roll in my hand to its kindred. There'd been some resistance along that weird little mental conduit, so I pushed more magic at it, and, yeah. Between the exploding bird and the burning cinnamon rolls, I was coming to the conclusion that more magic was not necessarily the solution. Brief aside, yes, flour in suspension is incredibly flammable. This is why custard factories tend to explode. These experiments made my head hurt, but they made it hurt in a good way. It was like whipping cream with a whisk. By the end, your arms ached and there was sweat dripping off the end of your nose, but you had whipped cream. Your arms feel better in 5 minutes anyway, and if you do it often enough, and during shortcake season, I do it often enough, you get muscles in places you never expected. I felt like I was starting to develop mental muscles. The first experiment that went really well was one that didn't involve me trying to make the dough do anything. I set a scone out on the counter and went downstairs with a scone from the same batch. Master Gildana said that war wizards develop ways to communicate through their various items, and while I couldn't quite figure out how I'd do that, it's not like I could make a scone talk to somebody, and you wouldn't ever eat a scone again if one did, but I thought maybe I could listen through the scone? I'm not saying it was easy. It wasn't. Scones don't have ears, for one thing, but I sat in the basement with Bob glopping happily beside me and concentrated on the pastry in my hands, and the one just like it upstairs, and suddenly warmth. Vibration. These things showed up in my head along the little conduit. They were faint and felt almost like thoughts, except I wasn't thinking them. The door opened and closed. The counter rattled a little. It was kind of like having the most boring daydream ever. Aunt Tabitha said something. Uncle Albert said something back. I couldn't make out the words, only a distinct wah, 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 wah. Scones aren't good with language, it turns out. Thud. Footsteps. Something plonked down on the counter. The voices coming closer. I concentrated very hard, digging my fingers into the crust of the scone. Still wondering if we should leave, said Uncle Albert. He sounded distant and garbled at the edges. Leave, said Aunt Tabitha sharply. Leave the bakery, you mean? Might be good to take Mona away from here, said Uncle Albert meekly. After the unpleasantness, they never did find Elwich. That's over now, said Aunt Tabitha. They caught the man doing it. He's in the dungeon up at the palace. Uncle Albert said something more garbled than usual. I squeezed the scone until it started to break apart in my hands. They say, I don't know. First they're looking for traitors, and then they're looking for wizards, and then they found a traitor, and now they want wizards again. I don't trust any of it. Mona's here. She's safe now. She's fine, said Aunt Tabitha in a voice that brooked no argument. Then a swooping, stomach-churning flight pressure. Oh God, Aunt Tabitha had picked up the scone. What if she took a bite out of it? What would I feel? What had Uncle Albert meant? I dropped the scone and the connection ceased immediately. When I picked it up again, gingerly, it was completely inert, but I could feel the connection there, just waiting for me to dribble a little magic into it. Probably, I'd feel nothing more threatening than the inside of the day-old case. But what about the rest of the batch of scones? What if I connected magically to one that somebody had already eaten? Would I feel myself being digested, or... I think it's best not to dwell on that too closely.
Yeah, I second the chat. This is the 16th figure.
Baking.
Perception of digestion.
I dropped the scone into Bob's bucket. He glopped happily over it. I think that might have been cannibalism. As spies go, scones were probably not going to be that effective. I might do better with gingerbread men. I was already more sensitive to where my gingerbread man was, and sometimes I got odd flashes through our connection. I suspect I could have seen or heard a lot more through him, but I didn't want to risk damaging the link. He'd been with me for too long. With a more expendable batch of gingerbread men, I figured out that I could indeed give 1 orders across the bakery if I had a scrap of the original dough in my hand. It was simple stuff, nothing too complex, walk to here and stop. I ran up and down the cellar steps 12 times a day, checking to see if they'd obeyed orders. My gingerbread man got very jealous. I went downstairs and found him giving orders to the lesser gingerbread men. One by one, they climbed up a shelf and did a swan dive into Bob's bucket. Hey, I said, snatching one up in midair as it executed a beautiful triple backflip. What are you doing? And after a while Bob slurped hungrily around the edge of the shelf. How did you do that? He folded his arms and stuck his shiny icing nose in the air. I resolved to pay more attention to him in the future. Aunt Tabitha didn't say anything about it, although I caught her eyeing the gingerbread men warily, as if she thought they might do something unexpected at any moment. To do a really dramatic experiment, though, like trying to control something across the city, I would have needed Spindle's help. Unfortunately, he'd made himself scarce. I couldn't blame him. When Aunt Tabitha heard how he had saved my life and helped pull the city's collective baguettes out of the fire, she would hear of nothing but that he would come to live with us. She made Uncle Albert clean out the storage room upstairs and told Spindle to consider it his own. Spindle took one look at the room, rose-pink quilt, lace on every available surface, a stitched sampler that read, "Today is the tomorrow you worried about yesterday," and promptly dived out of the window, down the rain gutter, and was gone up the street before Aunt Tabitha had time to turn around. "Poor little mite," she said, jamming her fists onto her generous hips. "He's like one of those shy wild birds. Well, we'll just have to win him over with kindness until he feels safe here." Privately, I thought this was laying it on a bit thick. Spindle had a lot of flaws. I would argue he was primarily composed of flaws, but shyness was not one of them. Still, I didn't pay to argue with Aunt Tabitha. "I wonder if he could learn a useful skill," she murmured, going back downstairs to the bakery. "He's a really skilled pickpocket," I said, opening the oven door to check on the muffins. The tops were rising and browning nicely, but hadn't yet cracked open. Sugar glittered from their crests. Aunt Tabitha ran a finger under her lower lip. Suppose that's a skill of a sort. Not really useful, though, is it? Since that particular skill had kept me from starving to death, and had gotten us the key to the garderobe, which turned out to be the keys to the kingdom, as it were, I could have mustered an argument. But I didn't feel like arguing with Aunt Tabitha. And we will leave it there for tonight. Now, I wonder if we're in the mood for some shenanigans. I pressed the buttons and things happened. So, our first piece of shenanigans this week. There's a button. I thought I pressed the button.
There's a shenanigans.
There is. There you go. There you go. Gaze upon the power of button. That is this week's shenanigans.
These are fun. I like these.
Pros and cons of dating the avatars of each entity. This comes from, I will just check what I've just given you, Expelliarmus Percabeth on Tumblr. The Vast. Pros. Literally the most romantic dates ever. Picnicking in the middle of wide open skies or giant lakes that stretch on and on for eternity. Cons. Kissing at terminal velocity is not as fun as it's cracked up to be.
Oh my.
The Corruption. Pros. Loves you with an intensity. Very clingy. Very touchy-feely. Cons. You will live in a literal rat's nest. The Eye. Pros. Knows all your likes and dislikes.
Really?
Knows exactly what you're feeling and have to say and what to say and to do to make you happy. Cons. For some reason, soon after you start dating them, all your computer privacy settings stop working.
No!
The Spiral. Pros. Knife hands, doors, corridors, slowly losing and questioning your sanity the more time you spend with them, being unsure if they even exist. Fractals, patterns, what's not to like. Cons. None!
That was such big Tim energy.
The Buried. Pros. The blanket forts. All the blanket forts. Cons. Loves the dirt more than they love you. The Desolation. Pros. Hot. Cons. Hot. The Stranger. Pros. They buy so many skin products that your skin will be almost unnaturally smooth after dating them for a few months. Dances with them are great. Cons. The number of mannequins in the house is starting to get disturbing. The Dark. Pros. They snap their fingers and the lights instantly go off. Candlelit romance, anytime, anywhere. Cons. There are only so many conversations you can have about the beauty of the dark sun until dinner talk grows stale, and they will definitely try to convert you to their creepy cult. The End. Pros. pulls off the goth aesthetic extremely well if you're into that. Cons: constantly reminds you that you're either going to break up, get married, or die. Muses aloud their speculations about which one it will be. Also, the only album they will ever listen to is Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. The Flesh. Pros: very interesting. I mean, good in bed. Cons: you will constantly find yourself sighing. Jason, tell me the truth. Did you cook human meat for dinner again? The Hunt. Pros: extremely passionate kisses, almost ravenous, you could say. Cons: kind of furry. The Slaughter. Pros: cute when they're angry. Cons: you tried to make a "you're not you when you're hungry" joke once, and they nearly stabbed your eye out. The Web. Pros: I mean, who doesn't love extra eyes and legs? Cons: Vriska did nothing wrong. The Lonely. Pros: will give you space whenever you need it, maybe more enthusiastically than you'd want. Cons: wants to see you so little you're not even sure you're in a relationship anymore. You talk to them once every 3 weeks. Embarrasses you at the annual institute party.
And speaking of the annual institute party...
Oh yes. This is from Writing is Neat. In fact, I'm just going to press the button and give you everything you need again.
Power of the button.
Fear Avatar Holiday Party. Simon hosts a bi-yearly winter get-together for the major avatars in random estates across the world that he's collected over the years. It tends to run like a potluck office party. There is an annual bet on if Peter will propose to Elias before or after midnight. The Slaughter and Spiral avatars are the best cooks as long as under no circumstances do you question what the dish is made of. There used to be a white elephant gift exchange until the incident of 1998. Thank you, Michael. Mistletoe is banned, but it hasn't stopped anybody from bringing it. Jared and Peter are popular targets. Elf on the Shelf, banned. Elias always wins the ugly sweater contest, even though he is never wearing a sweater. Annabelle is a little jealous. In the 100-ish years Simon has been hosting this event, there has yet to be a murder, although it was very touch and go that one year with the Elf on the Shelf. Oliver refuses to attend. And this is short, but...
I love this.
Elias places coffee on table. Peter: thank you, Elias. Elias pushes cup over. Peter, sighing: fuck you, Elias.
It just amuses the heck out of me.
It's just...
such a cat.
Just,
such a cat.
Because you know he's holding eye contact the whole time. Hey, is this your coffee? Is it your coffee? Fuck your coffee.
He is such a cat. No, fuck you. Statement begin.
So that's what we have for you this week, folks. So, as is always the case, we will close up by telling you where you can next find us. This coming Sunday, between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. British Standard Time.
Still summertime. I've checked. I wrote it down.
Okay, cool. You will be able to find us playing Windbound, because having done Geese Crimes last week, I think we're back to just fun with the raft.
Yote with the boat.
Yote with the boat. Time to yote the boat. Then, next Wednesday, we'll be back for the next 3 chapters of Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. And I have no idea whether I'm allowed to tell you what I'm doing on Saturday. But all I'm going to tell you is I'm doing a thing on Saturday, which is quite long, and which should hopefully be on a certain feed, which is not this one, quite soon. There will be, yes, it is the return of stabbing in the butt hours this Sunday, I promise you.
Time to make burgers.
Time to make burgers. Large boys with pointy sticks. Thank you so much.
Burger cat boys in the shade and does strange poisonous licky things now.
And that massive asshole crab thing that ate half our boat.
Oh yes, I hated that.
Sounds like a lot of chowder in our future. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a blast. There will be the Twitter thread up directly. Like I say, please join us on Sunday if you can, and if not, please join us next week for the next bit of the story, because it only gets better from here. And we will...
do not set your alarm for 5 a.m. if this is your first day off in a literal full month, Queen.
Good Lord, Queen. No, that's what VODs are for.
Sleep.
Sleep
Sleep is good stuff. Can you remind everybody what the fan art was again?
Yes, just as we close up, I would like to remind you that our two fantastic pieces of fan art at the top were by Z, who you can find on Twitter at @TheLilNan.
Just the button.
Here's the...
I pushed the button. Okay, that was...
There you go. And also, one more time for the shenanigans. We will be taking moderator applications opening soon. We'll have more details for you on that shortly.
People wanted to see the sign again.
Don't stop believing.
Okay.
And I think that's about it.
Yeah. I think
Massive thanks to Wendy for...
the cute little pumpkin hat.
How awesome is that?
That's adorable. I think it's really cute.
And we will see you next time. Have a good one, folks.